We've all heard that context is king, and it makes sense. Sometimes it's impossible to understand a verse unless we know how it is influenced by the verses around it. So, those that care, study to find out. Some of us even going so far as to learn Greek, Hebrew, and Latin. The problem with all this is that context isn't king. Every single time we read a book, watch a movie, or even talk to another human being, we bring along all our presuppositions. We never start at neutral. This is especially true when we read holy books. Instead of taking things in context, what we actually do is filter everything we read through one key verse. This verse becomes the lens through which we read, study, and understand. This is how all doctrine and dogma were invented. The issue is that this occurs without our knowledge. Most people have no idea which verse they use. More often than not, it's something they heard through repetition that ingrained itself in their subconscious. And bringing forth things buried in your subconscious is way more difficult than it sounds. It's so difficult, they gave it a name. It's called the hero's journey. Not only do humans filter everything they read through one idea, but entire religions do. Unbeknownst to most people, Judaism, Christianity, and even Islam are filtered through the book of Ezekiel. This is so ingrained in our cultures that it's true of people who have never even read a holy book, or even believe in God. So, how do we make context king again? The ancient Hebrews had a solution for this, and they called it the Pardes. Pardes is an acronym meaning garden, because the practice is said to restore paradise. Those 4 levels of interpretation are sometimes referred to as the 70 faces of the Torah, or the 70 faces of God. The literal was taught to children, and was associated with an infant drinking milk. As the child aged, they progressed through the levels until finally arriving at the esoteric as an adult. This mystical level eventually birthed Kabbalah, along with the mystery schools of Egypt, Greece, and even India, who all followed similar textual exegesis. Any child in ancient Greece could learn simple arithmetic, but it was in the mystery schools of Pythagoras and Plato where students learned that not only was 0 not a number, but either were 1 or 2. Let's look at an example of this in the story of Jacob and Esau. On the surface, it's about 2 brothers competing for a birthright. On a deeper level, it's about wholeness and the unification of opposites. Jacob struggles with his identity and just can't seem to get acceptance from his father. He's always in the kitchen with his mother and avoids the world of hunting and the spilling of blood. Remember, this is the guy who made a coat of many colors for his son. To win the affections of his father, he must become something he isn't, and as a result, finds himself at war with Esau, his masculine side. It isn't until he makes peace with himself, by embracing both hemispheres of the brain, that he discovers his true identity and his pineal gland is activated, and he sees the face of God. The style of the New Testament followed the Old, and we're told Jesus never spoke unless it was in a parable. And when people were confused and asked for literal explanations, he refused to give any and lost followers as a result. That's because truth can't be taught, only discovered. The Hebrew scribes who recorded the oral traditions that eventually birthed the scriptures took it very seriously, considering even textual anomalies sacred and full of meaning. The Latin Church not so much. Over time, the knowledge on how to restore paradise was brushed aside, at least for commoners, and was eventually replaced by what have been called the 4 diseases of Christianity. I'm willing to bet everyone watching has fallen for at least one of them. I know I have. Now, the early church never heard of these ideas, and it certainly wasn't how they read or taught the Bible. These 4 diseases pigeonhole us into not only missing what the stories are actually saying, but cause us to insert some of the most bizarre and harmful dogmas ever to be created in religion. Take the idea of the AntiChrist. We all believe he is going to appear at the end of the world to turn everyone from God and stop sacrifice in the temple. Except, that doesn't come from the Bible. The word Antichrist isn't even in the book of Revelation and is never once referred to as a man. And what's worse, the one who stops the sacrifice in the temple is Jesus. And it happened 2,000 years ago, at exactly the time the prophecy in the book of Daniel said it would. Another result of these diseases is the idea of original sin and the notion that Adam somehow cursed all of us genetically. And just like Hollywood's version of Lucifer or the AntiChrist, it's not found in the Bible. The idea comes from St. Augustine, but since it's been hammered into our subconscious for so long, we can't help but bring our presuppositions into the scriptures, especially when we read that Jesus was the second Adam. For many of us, this has become the key verse through which we filter all others. Before going to Babylon and learning about Zoroastrianism, no one ever thought to associate Adam with the world's problems. Look for yourself. When the Bible lists the reasons for why God causes the Great Flood, Adam isn't even mentioned. That's because the idea hadn't been invented yet. Now, does this mean that there's only one way to interpret Scripture? Thankfully, no. Which is why the Bible also says, "One thing God has spoken, two things have I heard." The Hebrews said God had 70 faces because we don't see the world as it is, we see it as we are. This includes God. Both God and the universe provide evidence for every theory imposed upon them. Everything is projection. This is especially true of holy books. A myth isn't something that happened. It's something that happens. There's only one story. There's only one person in that story. And that person is you.